inside the room. I swear to you, clear as day, I heard my own name breathed from somewhere in the dark corner of the room, and in the warped reflection I saw her face peeking around the doorframe, except her mouth was too wide. Sometimes it shifted to whispers, faint and indistinct, like she was talking to someone, but I never heard a response. I blinked, trying to focus, and then he turned his head toward me. It was the man from the road. Hey, hello. Welcome to ASMRk. I hope you are doing good. Today's video is another compilation, as always. We've got 5 scary stories taken from Reddit. Let's get straight to the first one, and as always, I hope you enjoy them. It started on a Saturday afternoon. I was at home with my wife, Angela, and our 7-year-old son, Noah. We live in a quiet suburban neighbourhood, the kind with cul-de-sacs and friendly neighbours who wave from driveways. The doorbell rang around 2 p.m. I opened the door to find the delivery driver holding a small, unmarked cardboard box. No logo, no shipping label I could see, just our address written in black marker. Package for you, he said. I didn't remember ordering anything, but I took it anyway. Angela peeked over my shoulder. Who's it from? There was no return address. We opened it together at the kitchen counter. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. The picture was of our house, taken from across the street. I checked the timestamp in the corner. It had been taken that morning. That evening, I decided to check our home cameras. We had one facing the driveway, the one by the front door. I scrolled through the footage, looking for the delivery guy or whoever left the box. I found him, except it wasn't the same person I'd seen that afternoon. The man in the footage was taller, bald, and wearing a grey coat. He walked up our driveway at 5 a.m, placed the box down, and then just stood there for about 10 seconds, staring at the front door. Then, just before walking away, he looked directly into the camera, and he smiled. I didn't sleep well at all that night. The next morning, Noah came downstairs, holding another Polaroid. Daddy, this was on my window. The photo was of Noah's bedroom, taken from inside the room. We called the police. They took our statement, looked around, and basically told us to keep our doors locked. Angela wanted to leave and stay at her sister's, but I insisted on installing more cameras first. That night, the house felt heavy with silence. Every creak made my skin crawl. Around 10 p.m, our motion-activated camera in the backyard sent an alert to my phone. The feed showed our backyard and the same bald man standing at the tree line just beyond the fence. He wasn't moving. I called 911, heart pounding, and the operator told me to stay on the line. By the time the patrol car arrived, the man was gone, no footprints. But when I checked the backyard camera again, I noticed something chilling. While the police walked around with flashlights, another figure appeared in the reflection of the glass door. A woman, pale, with her head tilted toward the camera. looked inside the door. There was no one there. We left that night and stayed at Angela's sister's. When we returned in the morning, I went to review the footage from the night before. At 3:12 a.m, the living room camera flicked on. A man and a woman, the same two we'd seen before, were standing in our living room, side by side. They didn't move. They just stared at the camera for over a minute before walking out of frame. I called the police again, but the footage seemed to glitch. When I replayed it, the living room was empty. There was only one frame left untouched by the glitch. It showed Noah's bedroom door opening slowly, and a pale hand curling around the frame. When I was a kid, there was a house at the very end of Willow Lane that everyone in our town whispered about. It wasn't abandoned, it was just wrong. The paint was chipped uneven, like the house was always halfway through rotting. The curtains never moved, even when the windows were open. And no one ever saw the owner, except for rare trips when he went to get groceries. Fast forward to last year. I'm 28 now, back in my hometown after my mum's surgery. I started taking evening walks just to clear my head. That's when I noticed the handwritten note taped to the mailbox of the Willow Lane house. It said, "Looking for company, please knock." For some reason, I couldn't get that out of my head. I asked around. Some said the man inside was named Harold, a widower. Others said nobody had actually ever seen him in over a decade. I thought it was probably just an eccentric guy. A week later, I gave in to curiosity. It was twilight when I walked up the uneven front steps and knocked. The door opened immediately. The man standing there wasn't quite what I expected. He was tall, rail thin, with grey stubble and skin that looked like parchment. His eyes didn't quite focus on me at first. They were pointed just past my shoulder, like he was looking at something over my head. "You came," he said, voice papery and relieved. He waved me inside without hesitation. The air inside was still and dry, with a faint metallic tang. The furniture was old but neatly arranged. Every photograph frame on the wall faced inward, away from the room, as if the pictures themselves were hiding. We sat in his living room, and he started talking almost immediately. "You'll hear them tonight," he said matter-of-factly. "Most people leave before they hear them, but you seem patient." I wanted to laugh it off as the ramblings of a lonely old man, but his seriousness kept me still. "Who?" I asked. He leaned in closer and whispered, "The ones that walk the walls." I told myself I was just being polite, but deep down I felt my stomach tighten. Something about the way he said it, like it was a simple fact, made the air thicker. As the sun dipped completely, Harold didn't turn on any lights. He just sat there, hands folded, waiting. It was fully dark when I heard the first sound, a dry, deliberate scuffing that seemed to move inside the walls. It was subtle at first, like cloth dragging against wood, but then came a soft creak directly behind the couch. glanced at the wall. There was nothing there, but the sound travelled upward across the ceiling and down the opposite wall. I muttered something about rats. He shook his head slowly. No, rats can't whisper your name. I swear to you, clear as day, I heard my own name breathed from somewhere in the dark corner of the room. I stood up so fast the chair tipped over. My heart felt like it was trying to break out of my ribs. Sit, Harold said softly. If you run, they'll follow you home. I didn't believe him, but I also didn't move toward the door. My legs refused to. The sounds got louder, more purposeful. Something was testing the edges of the room, moving in patterns I couldn't follow. And then the photographs began to turn. One by one, the frames swiveled slowly toward me, like invisible fingers were correcting their aim. That was it. I bolted. I ran down the street until my lungs burned. When I finally looked back, the house was just a shadow at the end of Willow Lane, silent and still. I tried to forget it, to tell myself I'd let a lonely man get inside my head. But that night, in my mum's quiet guest room, I woke up to the sounds of something brushing the walls. And when I checked the family photos of the dresser, one of the frames was turned to face the bed. I haven't walked near that house again. I used to live in a small, run-down apartment building above a row of forgotten businesses, a nail salon, a boarded-up pizza place, and, at the very end, a 24-hour laundromat. I hated doing laundry at night, but sometimes it was unavoidable. I dragged my basket downstairs around midnight, the air heavy with that faint mix of detergent and mildew, and clean one of the few working machines. Most nights the place was empty. One night it wasn't. She was already there, a woman in her 30s maybe, with damp hair clinging to her face. She stood next to a washing machine with the lid open, but she wasn't loading clothes. She wasn't even holding any. She was just standing there, staring into the empty drum. When I pushed the door open, the little bell above it jingled, and she snapped her head up so fast it made me flinch. "Hi," I muttered, trying to sound casual. She didn't answer. She just watched me as I carried my basket to a machine at the far end of the room. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just walked into someone else's problem. I tried to focus on my laundry. I shoved my clothes into the washer, fed in some quarters, and pushed the button. The machine groaned into life, a sound that normally faded into background noise. Not that night. I could feel her eyes on me. I glanced over. She'd moved closer, only a few machines away now, still empty-handed. Her face was pale, and her wet hair looked as though she'd just come in from the rain, but it hadn't rained all day. "You okay?" I asked, because the silence was worse than the staring. Her lips parted, like she was about to speak, but no sound came out. Then, after an unbearable pause, she whispered, "They left me here." I felt a shiver crawl up my back. Do you need me to call someone?" She didn't reply. She just turned, walked to the back of the laundromat, and disappeared into the tiny restroom. The door didn't close. I could hear the drip of a faucet and something else, a soft, wet sound, like bare feet moving slowly across tile. 10 minutes passed. The washing machine buzzed, but she hadn't come out. I stood there, trying to work up the nerve to check on her, when the overhead light flickered. I turned toward the restroom, just in time to see the door swing slowly shut on its own. I told myself the building was old, that drafts could do that it wasn't my problem. I just needed to grab my clothes and leave. When I reached the dryer, I froze. The glass window reflected the back wall of the laundromat, where the bathroom was, and in the warped reflection, I saw her face peeking around the door frame, except her mouth was too wide. I spun around. The bathroom door was half open again. The tile floor was wet now, with a thin trail of water leading out toward me. I didn't want to see more. I left my laundry behind and sprinted out the door, the bell above it jingling as I bolted into the night. The next morning, I came back with the manager to retrieve my clothes. He unlocked the door, and the laundromat was bone dry. No trail, no sign anyone had been there. My basket was still sitting by the dryer, clothes folded neatly on top. I told you, the manager said as I hesitated. Nobody comes in here at night anymore. I wanted to argue, to tell him about the woman, about her wet footprints and that whisper, but the words caught in my throat. Because in the security mirror above the change machine, I swear I could see her, standing behind me, hair dripping. I live in a pretty ordinary apartment building in the city. 4 floors, peeling paint, unreliable elevators. Nothing exciting ever happens there. 2 months ago, a new tenant moved into the apartment next door to me. The first time I saw her, she was unlocking her door with both hands, full of groceries. She looked normal enough, maybe in her late 20s, with straight black hair and heavy makeup, like she'd come from somewhere more glamorous than this run-down building. We exchanged the usual small talk. "Hi, I'm Daniel. I live next door." "Claire," she said, with a polite smile. I didn't think much of it until the first night I heard her. It started around 2 a.m. A faint murmuring through the wall. At first, I thought she was on the phone, but the longer I listened, the more I realised it didn't sound like a conversation. It sounded like humming, slow and deliberate, and then, without warning, it stopped. I lay there staring at the wall, waiting for it to start again, but it didn't. The next morning, I ran into Mrs. Taylor, the elderly woman who lived on the other side of my apartment. She's been here for about 20 years and knows every face that comes and goes. "You met the girl next door?" she asked casually. "Yeah, Claire, seems nice." Mrs. Taylor gave me a strange look. "She keeps odd hours." I laughed politely, not sure what she meant. That night, I noticed something I hadn't before. When I walked past the apartment on my way home, the peephole was dark. Someone was watching me from inside. I stopped for just a second. Then the peephole blinked away, as if whoever was behind it had stepped back. By the 3rd week, I was losing sleep. Every few nights, I'd wake up to that same low humming. Sometimes it shifted to whispers, faint and indistinct, like she was talking to someone, I never heard a response. Then, one night, I woke up to something else. Scratching. Not at the door, not in the hall. Inside the wall. I pressed my ear against the cold plaster. The sound was just behind my headboard, rhythmic and deliberate, like fingernails dragging in slow arcs. I banged the wall. The sound stopped immediately, and then, from the other side, in the quietest whisper, a woman's voice said, "Sorry." I didn't sleep after that. I finally saw her again a few nights later. I was unlocking my door when hers creaked open just a few inches. She peered out, hair messy, eyes bloodshot. "You hear them too?" she whispered. I froze. "Who?" She tilted her head, listening to the wall like it was breathing. "They said they like you." Before I could respond, she shut the door. The next morning, her apartment was wide open, empty, not a stick of furniture, not a bag. I told the building manager, and he swore no one named Claire had ever signed a lease for that apartment. That night, the humming returned, but it wasn't through the wall this time. It was inside my apartment. I booked a solo holiday last summer, the kind of trip I thought I needed to reset my brain. I'd been working non-stop and felt like my apartment walls were closing in on me. I found a cheap rental villa on the hillside overlooking a quiet European village. The photos showed sunlit walls, olive trees, and a balcony that looked out over the sea. The host, Marco, met me at the train station. He was polite, but oddly quiet, just nodded as he drove me up the narrow road that coiled around the hill. The villa was exactly like the photos. A small kitchen, one bedroom, and a balcony with a view that made the whole trip worth it. I settled in fast, unpacked, poured myself a glass of wine, and watched the sun melt into the horizon. By nightfall, the village below was silent. No cars, no music, not even a faint hum of life you usually hear in a small town. I told myself I wanted peace, but by the time I went to bed, the silence felt like a presence, present against the walls. The next morning, I went for a walk down the hill to explore the village. The streets were empty, but I did manage to find a bakery that was open. The woman behind the counter spoke almost no English. When I mentioned the villa, her expression changed immediately. She pointed at me, then held up a single finger. "One night." I didn't understand. I tried to ask her what she meant, but she just shook her head and refused to take my money until I left. Walking back up the hill with a loaf of bread, I noticed something I hadn't the day before. A man was standing on the bend of the road, halfway between the village and the villa. He didn't move when I approached. He just watched me with a blank, fixed stare. I tried to smile, mutter a greeting, but he didn't respond. When I glanced back a minute later, he was gone. That night, I left the balcony doors open to let in the breeze. The villa didn't have AC, and the air inside was heavy and warm. I woke up around 3 a.m, the room lit faintly by the moon. Someone was on the balcony. I didn't hear them come up the stairs, didn't hear footsteps on the stone floor, just a faint outline of a man leaning against the rail, staring out at the village below. I blinked, trying to focus, and then he turned his head toward me. It was the man from the road. He didn't move closer, he didn't speak, he just watched me. His face was in shadow, but the shape of his grin caught the moonlight. I scrambled to the bedroom door, flicked on the light. The balcony was empty. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the bed, gripping the handle of a kitchen knife I'd pulled from the drawer. When the sun finally rose, I packed my things and decided to leave early. I walked down the hill, dragging my suitcase. No one was on the road this time. When I reached the train station, I turned for one last look at the hillside. Someone was standing on the balcony again. I didn't stay to watch. I bought the first ticket out of that town and never once looked back. I emailed the rental company later to complain about someone entering the property. They replied, apologising for the confusion. The villa, they said, had been empty for 5 years. So that is the last story for today. I hope you enjoyed them. Thank you for watching or listening. Please do let me know in the comments what your favourite story was, and hopefully I'll be reading some more scary stories for you soon. Take care.